My name is Daniel Turner, and I am 68 years old. I've lived through a long journey, one filled with love, loss, and unexpected twists. My life has been a tapestry of rich experiences, woven with moments of joy and sorrow. I've been married twice, and together with my second wife, we've raised a large, blended family of 8 children. But if you had asked me years ago, I would have never imagined that my life would take such a spiritual turn. You see, I've had 2 near-death experiences, NDEs, both of which changed my understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. My first wife, Rachel, passed away when our youngest child was just 8 years old. The accident that took her life left me shattered, both as a husband and as a father. I wasn't sure how I was going to go on without her, let alone raise the children by myself. We had been married for over 20 years, and her sudden absence felt like an open wound that refused to heal. The months that followed were filled with sleepless nights and endless days, consumed by the weight of grief. I found myself often questioning everything I had believed in. But life, as it does, has a way of bringing unexpected gifts. 4 years later, I met Hannah, a kind and compassionate woman who understood my pain without me having to explain it. She had also gone through her share of loss, and when we came together, it felt like 2 broken pieces of a puzzle finding their place. She had 3 children from her previous marriage, and together, our blended family of 8 brought new joy and purpose into my life. But even with this renewed happiness, the deep questions about life and death remained unanswered. I would come to find those answers, though not in the way I expected. My near-death experiences were the defining moments that reshaped my beliefs and led me on a spiritual path I never anticipated. #### out-of-body experience. The first time I came face to face with death was on a cold November night. It was one of those nights when the air seemed to hang heavy with an eerie stillness. I woke suddenly in the middle of the night, feeling an unbearable pressure in my chest. At first, I thought it was just indigestion or maybe anxiety. I tried to sit up, but the pain only intensified, radiating through my entire body. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to alarm Hannah. I figured it would pass. But as the minutes ticked by, I could feel my breath getting shorter, my heart pounding as if it were trying to escape my chest. I leaned over and gently woke Hannah, telling her to call the hospital. She looked at me with concern in her eyes but didn't panic. She calmly dialed for help, but I could feel that I was slipping away, faster than I could keep up with. I told her to wake up our son, Ethan, and call our neighbor, Spencer, to come over and give me a blessing. As she rushed out of the room, the pain in my chest reached its peak. I could feel my body giving out. It was as if every ounce of strength was draining away. I gasped for air, clutching my chest in desperation, and then, suddenly, everything stopped. The pain vanished in an instant. For a split second, I thought I had recovered, that the worst was over. But then I realized something much stranger was happening. I could no longer feel my body. I glanced down, and there I was, lying in the bed, motionless. I saw my wife re-enter the room with Ethan and Spencer, her face pale and filled with worry, but I felt no fear. Instead, there was a profound calm, a sense of peace I had never known. It was as if I had stepped out of time, into a place where nothing mattered except the present moment. I floated above the scene, watching them rush to my side, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even concerned about what was happening. It was like watching a play unfold, knowing that somehow, everything was under control. I could see every detail, the look of panic in Hannah's eyes, Ethan standing at the door, unsure of what to do, and Spencer fumbling for words as he prepared to offer a prayer. Yet I felt no attachment to any of it. It was as though I had crossed into another realm, one where the concerns of this world had no weight. As I hovered above my body, I noticed 2 figures standing at the foot of my bed. At first, I couldn't make out who they were. They appeared as soft, glowing forms, not quite human, but not entirely unfamiliar either. I thought they might be Ethan and Spencer, but when I looked again, I realized they weren't of this world. They had an ethereal quality to them, as though they were beings of light, sent from somewhere beyond. Without speaking, they communicated with me. I could sense their presence, their purpose. They were here to guide me, to help me understand what was happening. And in that moment, I knew I was dead, or at least, I was no longer tethered to my physical body. Yet, I didn't feel sadness or fear. I felt as if I were exactly where I needed to be. I spoke to the figures, though not with words. It was more like a direct exchange of thoughts. If it is my time to stay, I am ready, I told them. But if there is a way to return, I would like to go back. They didn't respond with words, but I sensed their agreement. They were allowing me to choose, but it wasn't entirely up to me. It felt as though there was a greater force at play, something beyond even their control. One of the figures turned toward Spencer and seemed to whisper something in his ear. I watched as Spencer stepped forward, placed his hands on my head, and began to pray. It was a simple blessing, one I had heard many times before, but in that moment, it felt like the key to my return. Slowly, I began to feel a pull back toward my body. It wasn't sudden, it was like a gentle nudge, drawing me back into the physical world. I could feel the warmth of life returning to my limbs, the beating of my heart, the rush of blood through my veins. And with that return came the pain, an overwhelming, crushing pain that made me gasp for air. But even in the midst of that pain, I felt joy. I had returned. I was alive. Hashtag the spiritual foyer. The second near-death experience came years later, and it was unlike anything I had ever imagined. This time, I wasn't pulled out of my body by physical pain or trauma. Instead, it was as if I had entered a different realm altogether, a spiritual foyer, a place between life and death. I had been feeling unwell for several weeks, nothing too serious, just a general sense of fatigue and discomfort. One evening, as I was sitting in my chair, I felt a sudden wave of dizziness. I closed my eyes, thinking it would pass, but instead, I found myself in a vast, open space. It was like a great hall, or perhaps a waiting room, but there were no walls, no ceiling. It stretched out endlessly in all directions, yet it felt enclosed, intimate. The air was thick with a presence I couldn't describe, as though I were standing at the threshold of another world. In the distance, I saw three figures, my parents and my first wife, Rachel. They looked young, vibrant, full of life. They were not the way I had last seen them, worn by age or illness. Instead, they appeared as they had in their prime, glowing with a light that seemed to come from within. As I approached them, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. My parents smiled at me, their eyes filled with love and warmth. Rachel stood beside them, her hand outstretched as if to welcome me. It was a reunion I had longed for, yet never expected to happen this way. "You've already been given permission to stay here," my father said, his voice echoing in my mind. "Why are you back?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't know why I was there, only that I was. We embraced, and in that moment, all the pain, all the sorrow I had carried with me for years seemed to melt away. My father, my mother, Rachel, they were all so real, so alive. It was as if I had stepped into a different dimension where time didn't exist, where the past and the present were one. We spoke, not with words, but with thoughts, emotions. They told me about what they were doing in the afterlife. My father was working as a guide, helping souls transition from one world to the next. My mother was a healer, offering comfort to those who were lost or in pain. And Rachel, she was engaged in the work of connecting families, bridging the gap between generations, helping to heal the wounds of the past. Their stories filled me with a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. But I knew I couldn't stay. As much as I wanted to be with them, I felt the pull of the physical world, the weight of my responsibilities back on Earth. They understood, and they didn't try to stop me. Instead, they gave me their blessings, sending me back with love and hope. Hashtag encounter with Jesus. As I prepared to leave the foyer, I felt a presence behind me, one so powerful that I stopped in my tracks. I turned, and there he was, Jesus. He didn't look like the pictures I had seen growing up. He didn't have the flowing robes or the long hair. But I knew, without a doubt, that it was him. His presence was overwhelming, yet comforting. It was as if I had been wrapped in a blanket of pure love, a love so intense that it brought me to my knees. He didn't speak right away, but I felt his eyes on me, looking deep into my soul. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, yet it resonated through every fiber of my being. "Where is your heart?" he asked. The question took me by surprise. Where was my heart? It wasn't about my physical heart. It was about my soul, my priorities, my purpose. I had spent so much of my life focused on the material world, on the things that didn't really matter. I had lost sight of the bigger picture, the eternal perspective. Tears filled my eyes as I realized the truth. My heart had been in the wrong place. I had been so consumed with the worries of this world that I had forgotten what truly mattered: love, family, faith. I had forgotten to cherish the people around me, to nurture the relationships that were most important. Jesus didn't judge me. He didn't condemn me for my mistakes. Instead, he offered me a chance to change, to realign my heart with the things that mattered most. It was a moment of clarity, of understanding. I knew that when I returned to my life, I had to live differently. I had to make every moment count. ##### Vision of creation and the war in heaven. After my encounter with Jesus, I was taken on a journey through time. I saw the creation of the world, not as a distant observer, but as if I were there, witnessing it firsthand. I saw Jesus, then known as Jehovah, working under the direction of God the Father, bringing light out of darkness, forming the seas, the mountains, the animals, and the plants. Every detail was crafted with love and purpose, every creature a reflection of the divine. But the most powerful part of the vision was witnessing the war in heaven. I saw Lucifer, once a being of light, rebel against God's plan. He wanted to take away humanity's freedom of choice, to control their destiny. The battle that ensued was fierce, but in the end, Lucifer was cast out, defeated by the very thing he sought to destroy: free will. The vision reminded me of the importance of choice, of the power we have to shape our own lives. It was a gift, given to us by God, and it was a gift I had taken for granted. #### A new mission. When I returned to my body after the second NDE, I knew my life would never be the same. I had been given a glimpse of eternity, a reminder of what truly mattered. I realized that my mission in life was to share my experiences with others, to testify that God is real, that Jesus Christ is His Son, and that the Holy Spirit guides us on the path to eternal life. I began speaking openly about my NDEs, sharing my story with anyone who would listen. I wanted people to know that life didn't end with death, that there was something far greater waiting for us on the other side. But more importantly, I wanted them to understand that the choices we make here, in this life, have eternal consequences. Now, I live each day with purpose, with love, with gratitude. I cherish every moment with my family, knowing that our relationships will continue beyond this life. I make an effort to be kind, to be patient, to forgive. I know that I'm not perfect, but I also know that I've been given a second chance, a chance to live with my heart in the right place. And that, more than anything, is what my near-death experiences taught me. Life is fragile, fleeting, but it's also filled with incredible beauty and meaning. Every choice, every action, every relationship, it all matters. And in the end, it's love that carries us through, both in this world and the next. My name is Jonathan Carter, and I am 62 years old. Life has taken me through many twists and turns, some joyous, some heartbreaking. I have been married to my wife, Evelyn, for 35 years, and we have 4 wonderful children who have been the center of our world. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where faith and community were central. Despite this foundation, my understanding of life and spirituality was completely reshaped by 2 profound near-death experiences, NDEs, that changed me forever. I've had a good life, no doubt. But, like most people, I never thought much about death until it came for me unexpectedly, twice. These moments were unlike anything I had ever experienced, and they gave me a clearer understanding of what lies beyond this world. Both of these encounters with death have deepened my faith, but also opened my eyes to the realities of love, purpose, and the journey we all face, sooner or later. The first experience. It was a regular Tuesday evening. Evelyn and I had just finished dinner, and I was sitting on the couch, watching TV. There was nothing unusual about the day, nothing to suggest that in a few moments, my life would change forever. But suddenly, I felt a tightness in my chest, a pressure that grew stronger by the second. At first, I thought it was just heartburn or something related to dinner. I tried to brush it off, but the pain became unbearable. It felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest, and soon, I couldn't breathe. I called for Evelyn, who rushed in and immediately knew something was wrong. She grabbed her phone and called 911, but by the time the paramedics arrived, I had already collapsed on the floor. My vision blurred, my heart pounded erratically, and then, all of a sudden, everything went black. When I woke up, it wasn't in a hospital bed or even in my own home. I found myself floating above my body, looking down at Evelyn, who was frantic, and the paramedics who were working on me. They were trying everything, chest compressions, oxygen, but I was completely detached from it all. I wasn't scared or panicked. In fact, I felt a peace I had never known. There was no pain, no worry, just calm. As I hovered there, I noticed a bright light in the distance. It wasn't the harsh kind of light you might expect from the sun or a spotlight, but more like a warm glow, beckoning me. And standing in that light were two figures. They were tall, glowing softly, and I could tell immediately they weren't of this world. They felt familiar, like they had been waiting for me, though I couldn't recognize their faces. I drifted toward them, feeling as though I had no control over my movement. It was as if I was being gently pulled, guided toward them. When I reached them, I felt an overwhelming sense of love radiating from these beings. It was like they were old friends welcoming me home. I didn't need words to understand what they were communicating. Somehow, I just knew. They were here to help me decide whether to stay or return to my life. I wasn't ready to leave my family behind. I wasn't done being a husband, a father, or a friend. I had so much more to live for. And as soon as that thought crossed my mind, I felt the beings give their silent approval. In an instant, I was pulled back into my body. The sensation was jarring, like diving into icy water. I gasped, choking for air as I awoke to the paramedics hovering over me. The pain came flooding back, sharp and intense, but there was relief, too. I was alive. I had returned. The second experience. Years passed, and I tried to move on from that first near-death experience, though it never truly left me. I spoke about it with Evelyn a few times, but most of the details I kept to myself. I didn't know how to explain what I had seen and felt, and part of me was afraid of how people would react. Life continued on as usual, and I tried to focus on my family, my work, and enjoying the everyday moments that I had almost lost. But then it happened again, this time in a way I never expected. I had been feeling under the weather for several weeks, nothing serious, just a general feeling of fatigue and aches. One afternoon, while working in the garage, I felt a sudden weakness wash over me. It was different from before. This time, there was no chest pain, no warning signs. I simply collapsed, falling to the ground as if my body had lost all its strength. And just like that, I was out again. But this time, I didn't hover above my body. Instead, I found myself standing in what I can only describe as a great expanse. It was an open space, filled with a soft, glowing light, and yet there were no walls, no boundaries. I couldn't tell if I was inside or outside. It was a place beyond physical reality, a place that felt infinite. In the distance, I saw several figures standing together. As I moved closer, I realized they were people I knew, my father, my grandfather, and my older brother, who had passed away when I was a teenager. They were all there, waiting for me. They looked younger than I remembered, vibrant and full of life. It was as if death had restored them to their prime. I ran to them, overcome with joy. The reunion was unlike anything I had ever experienced. We embraced, and though we didn't speak, I understood everything they wanted to say. They were happy, content, and at peace. My father smiled at me, his eyes filled with love and pride. My brother gave me a playful nudge, just like he used to when we were kids. But then, from behind them, I saw someone else approach, someone I hadn't seen in years. It was my mother, who had passed away when I was just a boy. She looked exactly as she had in the old family photos, young and beautiful, with that same kind smile I had missed for so long. When she reached me, she placed her hand on my cheek and said, "Jonathan, it's not your time yet. You still have work to do." Her words echoed in my mind, and I felt a deep sense of understanding wash over me. I wanted to stay with them, to bask in their love and warmth, but I knew she was right. My time on earth wasn't finished. I had more to do, more to give. I had a family that still needed me. And just like that, I was pulled back once again, this time with less force but just as suddenly. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room. The doctors told me I had collapsed from dehydration and exhaustion, but I knew it was something more than that. I had been given another glimpse into the world beyond, another reminder that life doesn't end when we die. The question of the heart. The most profound moment of my second experience came after my reunion with my loved ones. As I was preparing to leave, I felt a powerful presence behind me. I turned, and standing there was a figure bathed in light. Though I couldn't see his face clearly, I knew who it was. It was Jesus. He didn't need to introduce himself. The love and peace radiating from him were undeniable. I fell to my knees, overcome by the sheer magnitude of his presence. He looked at me with compassion, and without speaking, he asked me a single question that pierced straight to my core. "Where is your heart?" The question hung in the air, and in that moment, I realized what he meant. Where was my heart truly focused? Was I living my life with purpose, with love, with faith? Or had I allowed myself to become consumed by the worries and distractions of the world? It was a moment of deep reflection, a wake-up call to examine how I had been living. I had always thought of myself as a good man, a family man, a hard worker, someone who tried to do right by others. But in that moment, I realized that I had been neglecting the most important part of my life, my faith. I had drifted away from the spiritual foundation that had been so strong in my younger years. Jesus' question wasn't one of judgment, but of love. It was an invitation to realign my heart with the things that truly mattered. I wept, not out of fear or shame, but out of gratitude. I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. A new perspective. When I returned to my life after the second NDE, everything felt different. I saw the world with new eyes. The little things that used to stress me out no longer seemed important.